Good afternoon and welcome to our faculty session on biology with Professor Jessica Hua. We're just going to give it one more moment for students to log in as you see these numbers rising, and then we will go ahead and get started. So again, welcome. We're excited to have you here, learn more about biology and the things that you can do with biology here at Binghamton, and we'll get started in just one moment. So welcome, thank you for joining us. If you're just hopping on, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. We've got just a short and sweet half hour here. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but we do want to give you the opportunity to see what it would be like to maybe have a class at Binghamton or just a snapshot of some of the various departments and the resources we have to offer you. So my name is Carrie Feierabend. I'm one of our admissions counselors here at Binghamton University. I'm gonna be here on the back end helping answer any admissions related questions in the Q&A. You can also throw any questions for Jessica in here on the Q&A as well. If they're biology related, then we'll be discussing those at the end of the lecture or in the middle if they pertain to whatever is being discussed right now. We will be using the poll feature, so please feel free to participate in those as well. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jessica Hua and she'll get started. So Dr. Jessica Hua is an associate professor of biological sciences here at Binghamton University. Her research focuses on understanding how anthropogenic chemicals influence aquatic systems. So her current topics in her research lab include community ecotoxicology, evotoxicology, disease ecology, and phenotypic plasticity. Today, she's joining us to provide a mini lecture about global change biology, working together to solve global biological problems. So Jessica, thank you so much for joining us, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for taking the time to join me today. So what I am going to present today is a little bit about the biological sciences department here at Binghamton University, and importantly, what might it look like for you as a potential future student at Binghamton University or an admitted student for next year. So I wanted to start with a poll. So biology is a diverse discipline and it can look a lot of different ways. So what I'm going to do in this next slide is show a bunch of photos of what it might look like to be a biologist. And so looking at these photos, which looks most appealing to you? What if you were to get a position in the biological sciences in the future, which one of these look interesting? So I'll give it maybe 30 seconds here for you to answer. And I'm hoping that this is a gut response. And this is also a way for me to better understand who I'm talking to. Aha. So it looks like the majority of you all chose B. So a scientist in the laboratory. Looks like about 2 of y'all chose A, so maybe in the medical field. It looks like science communication, at least one of you guys are interested in that. Sadly, nobody interested in ecology. Oh, that is fantastic. I'm going to hopefully get to convince you how cool that topic is and truly how integrated everything is. So 1 vote for E and 1 vote for F. So more on this in a little bit. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the biological sciences is diverse. And because biological sciences is diverse, accordingly, our department here at Binghamton University also reflects this diversity. So more specifically, the expertise in the department or your future professors, it's broken up into generally 3 sections. So 1, global change biology. These things include ecology, climate change. You can think about evolution in this section. It's broken up into the other section, which is infectious disease, and then also genetic and molecular mechanisms. So while we do have these 3 themes, they're highly interconnected. In fact, this schematic probably is a better representation of our department. So while many faculty are experts in 1 or 2 of these areas, we are a highly integrated and collaborative department, and we actually work with each other to look at these intersections. And one of the cool things about this is I think this is where biological innovation happens, at the intersection of multiple fields. And so we, for example, my expertise is in global change biology, but because I have incredible colleagues, your professors and students in this department, I can address questions that fall at that intersection. So a few details about our department. There are about 30 faculty members, and one of our major strengths in this department is getting students involved in research. And this is the exact topic. Getting involved in research is what I'm going to be spending much of my time today talking to you all about. So I'll start with a little bit about what it looks like to work in a lab when you're an undergraduate student. These experiences are highly valuable because they give you hands-on experience, and then also it provides a way of showing future employers, future institutions, a diversity in your skill set. So I'll be telling you about first what we do in my lab as a deep look, and then I'll be telling you about other opportunities, how you might get involved in research in the biological sciences department. So a little bit about myself. I have been here about 6 years now. I grew up in Austin, Texas, got my PhD at Pitt, and spent some time at Purdue as a postdoc. My primary responsibilities are to do research, run a research lab, and also to teach. From the administrative side, I also wear the hat of director of the Center for Integrated Watershed Studies, which I'll highlight a little bit later. For teaching, you'll mostly see me in upper level courses like ecology, ecotoxicology, and freshwater ecology. For research, I run a lab of about 15 students, 5 graduate students, and really the rest are undergraduates who are deeply involved with research. And one thing I'll plug is maybe you're not interested in ecological research or molecular research, but the point of these experiences is to teach you about the process of science. And so how do I teach my undergraduates the process of science? Well, one thing that we're all fascinated about is the idea that human populations are growing at unprecedented rates. And so understanding how human activities modify ecosystems will only become increasingly important. So towards that goal, members of my lab are fascinated by the use of chemicals and how they might influence natural ecosystems. We study things like road salts, pesticides, how heavy metals might influence the environment, pharmaceuticals. We're interested in light pollution, microplastics, and collectively, we want to know what these pollutants are doing. What are the effects of these contaminants on wetland ecosystems? So at this point, I always take a step back and tell you a little bit about why you should care about wetlands and why they're so awesome. One reason is that they support a wide diversity of organisms. A lot of organisms call wetlands homes. And this is really important. And one benefit to this might be to regulate things like biting insects, which can transmit diseases. Wetlands also provide a wide range of services to humans, including recreation and also flood control. Wetlands serve as a sponge that soak up a lot of the water and slow down floodwaters before they reach lower areas in the landscape. So there are a lot of benefits to wetlands. And so as a lab, again, we're interested in understanding what are the effects of contaminants on wetland systems. How do we approach this? Natural ecosystems are complex. And so what we do is we use this tiered approach. We start simple, and then we start slowly integrating in that complexity. So I'll tell you a little bit about what some of the students in my lab are working on. So this is Michael Korshi. He's interested in understanding the toxicity of pesticides, different types of pesticides. So he's using a simple laboratory test. So again, as I mentioned, we'll start simply and then start layering on that complexity. These tests are highly simplified and they're a really good way of understanding what a chemical does to many different organisms. And it's simple so that you could replicate it and you can test a lot of different chemicals. So that's the benefit of these simple laboratory tests. So Michael ran an entire experiment on his own, and he has worked from the beginning of designing the experiment all the way to writing up and publishing the work. But as I mentioned before, environmental systems are much more complex. Contaminants are not the only stressor that these organisms might face. For instance, let's say we're interested in the effects of pesticides on this tadpole. We know that pesticides are stressful, but these tadpoles are also facing other stressors in the environment, like this dragonfly nymph. This is a predator of tadpoles, so it has this really unique jaw that folds underneath its body. And to hunt, it's called a sit and wait predator. So it'll just hang out on a branch underwater and then wait for something to swim by and then extend its mouth part to capture the organism. And it's a really scary organism for tadpoles. And so this is an undergraduate, Mac Worsby, and he was interested in understanding how just the smell of a predator can influence these tadpole susceptibility to pesticides. And so what he found was that not even like the tadpole wasn't even able to see the predator; it could only smell the predator. The presence of that predator made the tadpole more susceptible to that pesticide. And so we show that it's important to integrate in that complexity, that extra stressor. Now, in the previous example, Matt, who is now a graduate student at Oklahoma University, he found that the presence of an enemy can change a tadpole's susceptibility to pesticides, but it can also work in the reverse order. For example, in my lab, we also study the effects of road salts. Road salts are used heavily, but when they get into wetlands, they often happen at really low concentrations. So the question is, does it matter? And so we show that at low concentrations, it may not kill tadpoles, but what happened, and this is Nicholas Buss's work in my lab, is that these low concentrations of salt make tadpoles more susceptible to their parasites. And what you're seeing on that moving image there, that's a trematode parasite. It is commonly found in nature. And I think what's important about this study is that it shows that while these low concentrations may not have seemingly dramatic effects, they can still negatively affect organisms in how they deal with interactions with other stressful conditions like the presence of a parasite. So beyond this, I've talked about just two parts of the community, a predator and a parasite. Natural communities are much more complex than this. At BU, we have this incredible opportunity to explore this complexity at our field station facility. This is a unique facility and it provides really amazing research opportunities for undergraduates. This is just a snapshot. You'll notice that oftentimes in labs, if you were to participate in the lab, there are multiple undergraduates working together on a project. I wanted to highlight one student in particular here, that's Paradise Blackwood. She won an award for her independent research at Rutgers, and she is now a PhD student at Purdue University. And so this is just highlighting the fact that the point that students that are involved in research have an extra layer of expertise that can help get them to the next step past undergraduate. So I've talked about manipulative experimental studies. Perhaps the most unique aspect of this campus are the natural areas. We have the Nature Preserve, we have Nuthatch Hollow, and also Nuthatch Hollow is going to be a living building, one of the few in the country, and also Lake Lieberman, or Lake Taco Bell, as some of the students have, if you Google Lake Lieberman on campus, some of the students have changed that to Lake Taco Bell on Google, which is super interesting. So I thought that was funny. But all in all, it provides us, these natural areas provide us with the ability to confirm what we see in experiments that play out in actual nature. So bringing it back to the point, we take it simple and start building in this complexity to understand what contaminants do in nature. And so one thing I wanted to point out, I have in this photo here, this is Jeff Baggs. He's now a science communicator journalist. You have Vivian here. She is now in med school. And this is Ying. She is in nursing school. So it's not just the grad school route that undergraduates are successful in after participating in research, but I think it's really important to diversify your skill set by doing research, because again, the point of doing research is to learn the process of science, and that's something that the biological sciences department here at Binghamton University is really quite fantastic about. There's lots of opportunities for you to get involved. So at this point, I've been talking about 16 minutes now. I want to take a step back. I talked about all these effects of chemicals, but we need to remember that these chemicals exist for a reason. So one of these reasons is for safety of humans. So the use of road salts. This is the car that I used to drive. I I'll have to admit, I'm extremely grateful for the use of road salts because this car was terrible in the snow. So the use of road salts, while it may have negative effects, is really important for the safety of people like me and my family. I mentioned at the very beginning that human populations are growing. With growing human populations, there's also a need to feed all of us. And modern agriculture, including the use of pesticides, is critical to make this successful. And so it's important, I think, to talk also about the balance. And this balance, in order to communicate this, the harm and the benefit, I think an important part of research, and also something that is really important to many of us in the biological sciences department, is science communication. So when it comes to science communication, there's, as many of you likely have seen, there is a mistrust of science. And so in the next slide, what I'd like to do is throw up a poll. I'm curious, with the members of this audience, how well do you know a scientist? Maybe you don't know any scientist. Maybe you know at least one scientist, but don't actually interact with them. Or maybe you know at least one scientist and interact with them regularly. So as before, I'll give this about 30 seconds, and then in the next slide, I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. All right, so it's actually nicely mixed. So the majority either don't know a scientist or know at least one scientist but don't interact with them, while three of y'all know one scientist and interact with them. And so, as I promised, I think this is important because I asked this question as some suggest that this mistrust in science has to do with the fact that a lot of Americans don't interact much with scientists. And so when it comes to science communication, something that we value highly, I think that one of the strengths of the biological sciences department is our willingness and ability to take these collaborative approaches. And you can see this in the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary organizations and opportunities that students can get involved in, including the transdisciplinary areas of excellence, CIWS, which is the Center for Integrated Watershed Studies, Environmental Studies program. All of these allow students to get a broader perspective on the topics that they're interested in by working with folks from different areas of expertise. And so one example of this, I'll tell you about Benjamin McLaughlin, who is an undergraduate in my lab who was a graphic design major as well as an environmental science major. And he was interested in using his expertise to communicate about his expertise in art to communicate about science. And it's something that a lot of students have the freedom to do here. So Ben wanted to test art's ability to communicate science to third graders. And what he did was he decided that the best way to do this is to try to get third graders to care about something they probably wouldn't care about normally. And so he chose to focus on parasites. So he wanted to make third graders care about parasites. So what we decided to do is to make a children's book. And this was the original design. You may notice that this is my design. I'm not an artist. I care a lot about the arts, but Ben is the artist here. And as an undergraduate, he was able to put together a storyboard of this idea. And this is where we stand now. This is a story about Gemma Jones and her friend Talia the trematode. They go through the life cycle of the trematode, which is complex. It has multiple life stages. And so students and third graders will learn about these different life stages. It's called Gemma Jones Visits Nuthatch Hollow. If you recall, this is an actual place. And so this is a way of getting these third graders to learn about these parasites. And it's a way of integrating and using art as a means of science communication. And so I highlighted this because it just highlights the diversity of types of research that students can do in the biological sciences department. Ben is now just about to graduate from RIT with a graphic design specialty. So I talked about things that have the opportunities in my lab. There are other opportunities if you aren't joining a lab called course-based research opportunities. These are things that you could start off right away as a first year. So the first year research immersion program, where you get to do research from the very beginning. And then later in your career, there are upper level courses where you can do research. And one in particular, plant ecology, is a class where you start from the very beginning designing a question. And by the end of it, a lot of these students have published the work in the topics that they worked on. And again, this is really important as it sort of helps show your future grad schools, your future med school opportunities, whatever future you're hoping to pursue, a different side of you, adding another layer of your future expertise. There's also opportunities for public engagement. I'll tell you an example of one of the classes with the COVID-19 spin. Many of you know that with online learning, especially with parents with young kids, it can be quite crazy. And so in one of the classes that are taught in biology, ecotoxicology, one of the students, this is Jackie, what she developed was a homeschool lesson plan to help parents who are just transitioning to having kids at home, a lesson plan to help them learn about chemicals in their household. And so in these public engagement sort of classes, students take a real world problem and solve it in the class based off of what they learn in class. Another example of public engagement, and by 324 urban ecology, students in this class are working with Broome County Parks and Recreation Department in class to go out and map invasive species. And this is one way that students can not only learn about the materials, but also make an impact on the community around them. So wrapping it up, in the beginning, I asked what looks the most appealing to you and showed a lot of different examples here. And I think that this diversity is reflected in the biological sciences department. But most importantly, taking a step back, I want you to know that BU students are at the heart of research and engagement. And so this means a lot of different things and looks like a lot of different ways. If you were interested in any of the types of research that we talked about in my lab today, feel free to follow us on Instagram. If you want more information about the different types of research that are done in the department, definitely check out the website, the Biological Sciences website. So with that, what I'd like to do is open things up for questions. I think that I'd be open to any types of questions that you might be interested in asking.
Thank you so much, Jessica. This is great just to learn about, practically what it means to research. I know a lot of students say, yes, I had a great research experience, but giving that actual, data and showing that is really helpful for our students. A couple of questions here, and students, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and Jessica and I can talk about them. But my first is, I'm always impressed. You know every single, one of your students by name. You obviously work very closely with them. How do you come about having some of those students in your labs? Do they come through you through classes, through FRI? What various ways can students actually attain those research opportunities, and how do you, and finding the students that come to your lab?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I think it happens multiple ways. Some of the students have come through my ecology class. They came in not interested in ecology, and all of a sudden they're like, yes, I need to get some more experience on this, and they'll talk to me, and we'll talk about potential projects that they can do. Other times it's students in my lab will bring in other students that they're friends with, because it is a community that research, that we do research together. So that's another way that students come in. I think generally folks will email me, and that's how we begin the conversation. But I think the biggest mistake that people make is making the assumption that you can't begin research until you have more experience. So if you get anything from this and you do come to Binghamton University, reach out as soon as you can, because oftentimes faculty are interested in training students young while they're early in their career, so that they can actually leave their labs with something tangible, because research does take quite a bit of time.
Thanks, Jessica. And I guess my understanding is probably the majority, if not all of those students that you showed, those are undergraduate students. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the amount of undergraduate research opportunities here, I know we say it all the time here at Binghamton, but to show it practically and what that means, I think is so important for our students here. Um, Another, I think, broad question, but it's always a helpful one for some of our students. I know, and we have some prospective students on here. Maybe you're a junior and still thinking about which colleges to apply to. What makes Binghamton's biology department different than, say, any other, SUNY or any other school's biology department? Maybe you can broaden on that a little bit and just the difference that we have here at Binghamton.
Yeah, I think one of the big stands out about our department are the research opportunities. And it's not just in ecology. The quality of the research experience is something that you will not get at every institution. Oftentimes, you have graduate students doing all of their research or postdocs. So after you get your PhD, those types of researchers doing the research. But here, undergraduates get these genuine experiences. And this is important because with these genuine experience, you actually stand out when you go to apply for future jobs. It's not just I worked in the lab and did dishes, but I worked in the lab, I asked a question, I understand the process of science, and I published it. Here is my result. And that's going to look fantastic for medical schools, for pre-health, for pre-vet, for graduate schools, anywhere you want to go. That is the currency of success. And you will not get that everywhere. Most schools don't give you that opportunity.
And I know that you had, you mentioned your focus is ecology and you had students in your lab, but also students who have gone on to med school, who have gone on to do graphic design. So it's not necessarily, you're not bound by your major choice here at Binghamton, but really anyone can go into that field, which I think is so helpful for Binghamton students to have that flexibility. I know a lot of students choose and start out saying, oh, I think I know this and this is what I want to do. And 2 years later, it's something completely different. So that's very helpful to know as well. We have another question here. So when publishing that research, is this the primary student who helped do that research? Are they the first author? How does that look in a published article?
Yep. So undergrads are often first authors in the publications that come out of my lab. I highlighted a few of those. Matt Worsby, for instance, he was, and don't get me wrong, research is a lot of work. And so Matt devoted a lot of time. I think he left my lab with 3 or 4 first author publications, which is incredible. That's like about as many as like graduate students. So you can imagine how competitive that he was when he was applying for graduate schools. Mm-hmm. Now, there are different tiers, of course. There are those that are interested in pursuing medical school, and the first author publication isn't quite as necessary, right? They just want to show that they were involved in their research. And so for those students, oftentimes they publish in teams with one person that is the leader of that team. So I talked about Ying, and Kelly Crane is another example that I didn't bring up, but she's now at Upstate Medical, and she played an important role in helping with research and helping writing up, but she didn't lead the project. So there are different levels that you need to think about. And before you join a lab, you have to think about what it is you need to get out of that lab.
Thank you, Jessica. That's really helpful. We're almost at our half hour, and I think this has been really helpful. We've had some great questions, and we always appreciate you sharing, that real world research that your students do. I think it's so important to practically understand it, to know what our students are here doing at Binghamton, whether it's in the nature preserve, whether it's through the courses, whether it's in the community. There's just so many ways to get involved, which is really helpful, especially for so many students who are interested in those biological sciences, maybe pre-med, maybe pre-health, maybe you're not sure, but just wanting to get your feet wet. So thanks again for Jessica for joining us. Thank you everyone who joined us on here to watch this webinar, and we hope you got something out of it. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email us. admit@binghamton.edu is our email address here. And if you do have any questions, you can always email us here. We can forward them to Jessica, or please take a look at that biological sciences, their department website, or the website that we have on our admissions page for biology. I know there's a 1-minute video out there of a current student, what their experience is like. I'm sure it includes research opportunities as well as extracurriculars, and what their future plans are. I know we have some ambitious students here at Binghamton. We love them all, and our faculty best of all, because they help lead them all. So thank you so much, Jessica, again, and we hope to see you here sometime in the future, or answer your questions if you do have any. Thanks again.
Appreciate it.